Hi, everyone. It's good to be with you. We were asked to speak to the title of the session, Chances and Risks After the Election in Israel. I'll make some introductory remarks and then pass it to Gideon. I believe there's a false assumption that this government is the worst in Israeli history. They are definitely the most loudest and most blatant in terms of public relations and how they are speaking what they are thinking. But I do not believe that it is the worst in Israel's history. Let me give you an example of why I say this. Previous Israeli governments have dispossessed 3/4 of the Palestinians in historic Palestine in 1948. Previous Israeli governments put all Palestinians in Israel proper under military rule from 1948 to 1966. Previous Israeli governments launched a military occupation in the West Bank, Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. Sinai, but that was returned. All previous Israeli governments have supported the settlement enterprise. Some established it, some support it. Many of the Israeli governments have participated in the hermetic seal of the Gaza Strip, including bombing it every few years. Past Israeli governments, and recent ones as well, have killed Palestinians with full impunity. They have imprisoned Palestinians using administrative detention, which means you are arrested without charge, with impunity. They have collectively punished Palestinians historically. Previous and current administrations in Israel have ignored international law. They have defied UN resolutions. All Israelis governments have expanded, as I noted, or established the illegal settlement enterprise. The list is long, and I can go on and on. But today we have the major human rights organizations in Israel and in the world, such as Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International and others, who have documented the reality on the ground in a way which leaves nothing for guesswork. And some very brave journalists, like my co-panelists today, have also documented and continue to document what happens on a daily basis. In summary, there is nothing new that we will learn that will change the model of what we have been seeing for the last 50 years, 5+ decades. Now, this current government came to power, and I believe it poorly represents the Israeli public at large, and they say much more than they're going to be able to do, I would hope. Yet there are risks due to their need to accelerate their agenda, because I believe that they know very well that this will be a short-lived government. That does not mean going back to the pre-current government is a state of affairs which is accepted, just the opposite. It's a state of affairs that allowed all the things that I mentioned to happen away from the public eye. The difference today is this accelerated agenda with these very right-wing elements is not only an accelerated process, but it's also a very visible and vocal reflection of what their agenda is. Let me summarize what I think the 3 risks and the 3 chances may be. The first major risk is that there'll be a 3rd major forced dispossession. Note, I'm not talking about a 3rd intifada, a 3rd Palestinian uprising. I think that's happening already. It's taking a different shape and form, but it's already Palestinians rising up and resisting this military occupation. What I'm speaking about here as a risk is a risk that the Israeli government will repeat what they did in 1948 by force and what they did in 1967 by force, which is try to forcefully depopulate the West Bank. The second risk, I believe, and there are many, I'm only mentioning 3, is that there will be a process of what I call Gazaization of the West Bank, to try to turn the West Bank into the same kind of depressed reality that Israel was able to get Gaza to reach, which is basically, as one of the Israeli generals said, bombing us into the Stone Age, taking us hundreds of years back. There's actually a new Israeli film. It's titled H2, The Lab of Occupation, which says something slightly different. It says instead of turning the West Bank into Gaza, that the Israelis will use the model that they created in the occupation of Hebron and use that as a model to repeat it across the West Bank. Either way, a Gaza model in the West Bank or a Hebron model in the West Bank is causing a potential for another level of catastrophe to happen. And the third risk, I believe, and it's one that we're facing today, is that there's a sense of normalizing the killing of Palestinians and the collective punishment of Palestinians. What does that mean? There's a normalization of war crimes, and that cannot be accepted for sure not by Palestinians, but we would hope it would not be accepted by the international community as well. What are the three chances that I think the current situation presents? Number one, I think that the current acceleration of this Israeli agenda in a very bold and public way may finally get people to wake up to what we Palestinians and those in the Israeli peace camp have been saying for a very long time, that Israel has exceeded the state of a military occupation and has entered into something very different. Some would call it apartheid, some would call it a continued colonization, call it what you may, but this is no longer a military occupation, noting that Israel never accepted this as an occupation and never applied the 4 Geneva Conventions to start with. Hopefully, this will be a wake-up call, hopefully for the Israelis, hopefully for Jews around the world, and hopefully for others. The second chance that that wake-up call presents is that states start to act. Instead of paying lip service to a non-existent peace process, we would hope that states would act in finally holding Israel accountable. And there's tools to do that. We know because we're watching it happen between Russia and Ukraine. There's tools of sanctions. There's tools of not buying Israeli arms to give them more incentive to produce more arms, which they test out on the Palestinians in the occupied territory. And there's also long-standing political positions that states hold, like the desire for a two-state solution. This current state of affairs provides the opportunity for states to act on that political position and finally recognize the state of Palestine, like Sweden did, like 138 countries in the world did. And Switzerland is part of the 40-some who have yet not. And it's time for them to actually act politically and recognize the state of Palestine. The third chance that this current government presents is that there will be hopefully a reframing of the situation, not to go back to what it was 1 month ago before Netanyahu took office, but rather not to go back to a state of military occupation, which is hush-hush and happening every day without anyone knowing about it, but rather, as Biden would like to say, to build back better, to have corrective action that brings the conflict in line with international law and either ends this military occupation clearly with a date or provides the Palestinians under Israeli control with rights as they provide citizens of Israel with rights. And Israel can't have it both ways. If it's an occupation, it must end. If it's not an occupation, then I am a subject to the Israeli control. I pay taxes, but I do not have a say in how those taxes are spent. And that cannot exist or coexist with the sense of occupation. The world has defined it as a military occupation. The world collectively is calling on Israel to end it. Now is the time for third states to weigh in and either hold Israel accountable or to sanction Israel to make sure that there's a price for them to pay as long as they ignore international law. I will stop here.
Thank you, Sam. After you, I can just say that I agree, not almost, but to every word you said. I'll try to elaborate a little bit on some aspects, but basically I totally agree with you. I think that there is one contribution of the new government in Israel, and this is namely that this government had put an end to the masquerade, had torn all the masks from the face of Israel. Now you can see Israel as it is, as it really is, without any cosmetics, without no illusions. You see in front of you the truth. And the truth is that the majority of Israelis elected a racist, nationalist, ultra-Orthodox government because the majority of Israelis want a racist government. It's not by chance that the majority elected this government. It's a very, very fair description of Israeli public opinion. Most of the Israelis are racist. Most of the Israelis are nationalist. Most of the Israelis want this government to govern. And maybe we'll put an end to this illusion that most of the Israelis want peace, or most of the Israelis want equality, or most of the Israelis are liberal and advanced people. They are not. And what is a better proof than the results of these elections? But more than this, after those elections, when it is so clear, I mean, it's clear for decades, but those who needed the proof that Israel has no intention to put an end to the occupation, I claim it never had. But let's say there were some moments in which there were some signs that Israel has some slight intention to put an end to it. Now it's very clear that with this government, they say it clearly, they have no intention to do anything politically or diplomatically with the Palestinians. The only language they're going to use with the Palestinians is the language of force, the language of aggression, and the language of depression, of really oppression, of really making the Palestinians forget about any idea of sovereignty, rights, or anything national. So once you realize that this is the case, that after 55 years, there is no end to the occupation and there will be no end to the occupation, one should draw the conclusions. And the conclusions, the legal conclusions, are very clear. A military occupation can be only a temporary phenomenon. It cannot be a permanent phenomenon. Once it is a permanent phenomenon, so it's not a military occupation. It's part of the regime of this country. And as I claim for many years, but now it's really being proven and declared, the occupation is there to stay. The occupation, there's nothing more permanent than this. And therefore, it defines the regime of Israel. In other words, nobody can deny anymore that Israel is an apartheid state. You cannot deny it anymore. You could deny it as long as the occupation was temporary. Okay, Israel had occupied some territories in war. Israel has no intention to stay there forever. It is just playing card for diplomacy, for making peace with the Palestinians who never want peace. And then those occupied territories will be returned to their owners. No, that's over. Judea and Samaria, as they call it, the West Bank, and even Gaza are part of the state of Israel. They are under Israeli control permanently. And if they are under Israeli control permanently, Israel cannot be defined anymore as a democracy. Now, the first one to realize it were people outside Israel. in the last days, you could see really a dramatic shift in the attitude toward Israel from its best friends. What the occupation didn't do for 55 years, some intentions of a legal reform in Israel did within 2 weeks. Look at the visit of Secretary Blinken in Israel, and even more so, look at the rhetoric in the visit of Benjamin Netanyahu in France. Those were 2 tough meetings, and all of a sudden, Israel faces a new West. I don't know how to explain it, that 55 years of occupation never brought the West to talk to Israel and to treat Israel like it did. But now, when the West is so shocked that Israel will stop being this liberal democracy as they believed and will not share the same values with the West, now the game might be over. And you saw very dramatic signs to it really in this weekend. I think France will give the tone now to the entire Europe, who is just waiting for an opportunity to change the attitude toward Israel. But more important than this, it seems that the American regime, the American administration, is not going to remain indifferent to the changes within Israel as it used to do with a brutal military occupation of decades. Be it one reason or another, those are very, very encouraging news. In other words, as Sam rightly said, it's more than a wake-up call. It is already a wake-up. Will it last? I don't know. Will they finally move from talks to deeds? It's a huge question. Because if it will be only condemnations, Israel learned very well to ignore condemnations, because Israel realized that all those condemnations of the EU and of the United States are totally hollow. It must move to actions. But to judge according to the tone of the last days, there is a hope that we're reaching a point in which the West will tell Israel, enough is enough. Ça suffit. We treated you until now as we treated you. You were the darling of the West, not because of the occupation, but nevertheless the occupation, because we saw you as a member of the Western liberal world. Now it's over. You are not anymore a member of this exclusive club. And if you decided to quit this club, you are going to pay for it, because you will be excluded from now on. I cannot think about more dramatic news. Again, I must restrict our expectations. Israel is still very powerful. The Jewish lobby everywhere is still very powerful and influential. Israel is still manipulating the history, manipulating as the Holocaust, obviously, manipulating and using the Islamophobia in Europe and in the United States. All those things still play to the hands of Israel. But maybe the first time in many, many years, there is a hope that the world might change. People like me who never believed in a change which will come within Israel, because Israel never had an incentive to change. I never thought that the Israelis will wake up one morning and say, oh, the occupation is not nice, let's put an end to it. Never. And I don't think it will ever happen. For us, the only hope was international intervention. Maybe in those days we see the first fruits of it, the first beginning, thanks to the results of these elections, the last elections.
Yeah, one question about the demonstration in Israel. Of course, we were very enthusiastic here to see the liberal demonstration, but after some day, we observed that they didn't take the Palestinian flag, or they are not protesting against occupation, against all the situation in Palestine. Why? Because if we fight only for a new liberal Israel as 10 or 5 years ago, that will not change a lot for Palestine. So my question, why the liberal demonstrations, 100,000 people, very impressive in Tel Aviv and Israel, forget or didn't take the flag of the Palestinian revendication as many others in the demonstration? Thank you.
They didn't forget anything. They did it intentionally. They even tried to avoid any kind of expression of resistance to the occupation or any kind of expression to the Palestinian rights, like raising the flags, because like the last protest back in 2011 in Israel, what was called the social protest, also this protest for democracy in Israel is dealing only for democracy to the Jews in Israel, and therefore people like me don't attend these demonstrations because this is not my protest. Those people are fighting for democracy, which is very encouraging, but a very limited democracy for a very limited population which lives under the control of Israel. This, in my view, is hypocrisy. This, in my view, means double standards. And this, in my view, shows how the apartheid state is deep-rooted in the minds of the liberal camp in Israel. Not only the right-wingers, but the liberals. Because those who go tonight and every Saturday night to the squares of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and Haifa and other places are the good Israelis. They are all from the liberal camp. And even they are not ready to involve the occupation because on the occupation they might be differed. They might not agree. Which brings me to the conclusion that we all have to remember there's a huge majority in Israel, almost wall to wall, in favor of continuing the occupation. And this is part of this masquerade which is now over. Those people will not raise the Palestinian flag, but as I tried to claim before, those demonstrations might have an effect on the attitude of Israel, of the world toward Israel.
I would just add to that, if you have not read Gideon's article about the demonstrations, I highly recommend it. It's a very powerful article. But there are also tactical opportunities available. For example, the new Israeli Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, has now legislated an order which says it's illegal to raise the Palestinian flag in public areas inside Israel. I'm not sure if you're aware, but on every year on the 30th of March, there's a commemoration for something that happened back in the 70s. It's called Land Day, and it's a time where Palestinians inside Israel and everywhere raise the Palestinian flag. So I assume this March 30th, you will find maybe 1 million flags being raised in Israel in public spaces to make the case that you cannot pretend that the 20% of the Israeli population, Palestinians, are invisible. And that's going to be a flashpoint, I assume, as well as we move forward.
I have a short question to both. What is really the rule of the army, of the leaders of the army? I see some differences about that. What is the state of Israel making?
I can speak in terms of the receiving party of their actions. We have had attacks against our refugee camps almost on a daily basis. This morning it was in Jericho. A couple of days ago it was in Nablus, and then in Jenin, Deheshe, in Bethlehem. So we have incursions of our camps almost every day. Israeli military is operating in our cities every night, arresting people from their beds every night. I have a 76-year-old cousin who is in prison, a Palestinian-American businessman. And he's one of 833 people who are being held under administrative detention, which means you get detained and they don't tell you why they're holding you. This is happening at a pace of around 10 to 15 Palestinians every night, numbers that we've never heard of before. So we have a continuing closure of different areas of the West Bank. Of course, Gaza remains closed off, but now within the West Bank, Jericho, for example, has been sealed off for the last 5 days, and Nablus was before them. So in terms of what the Israeli military is doing on the ground, it's much of the same. They have not changed their pattern of embedding the occupation and damaging the community's territorial integrity, as well as ability to operate in business world and so forth. It's an ongoing process. Maybe Gideon can talk about some of the statements that some of the security people have made. That's more of an Israeli context.
Before this, I would like to just remind us that the 1.5 years in which Netanyahu was not in power and Israel had a liberal or so-called liberal government was the most bloody year in the last 15 years. They killed in this year almost 200 Palestinians. Most of them had no reason to be killed, but no reason, even if they had a stone in their hands. We claim always to mix up and say, oh, if you hold a stone, you must be dead. And it became the new set of values in Israel, that someone who throws stones or even a Molotov bottle should be executed. But according to this, almost all of the 200 victims in this bloody year were innocent, or at least didn't deserve to be killed as they were. This was under the most liberal government that Israel had in recent years. So you see, there is no difference, government after government, and the military is going on with the same methods, knowing to talk only in one language. And the main reason is that nobody puts borders to this army, neither within Israel nor in the international community. Crimes of war are committed on a daily basis, and nobody is accountable, and nobody is brought to justice, and nobody punishes those who are responsible for it. And this will continue like this.
Ich habe eine Frage an euch beiden wegen der letzten Abstimmung, und zwar über die arabische Beteiligung in der Abstimmung. Warum oder was ist falsch gelaufen, dass die Araber nicht als Einheit auftreten können und so viel Sitzplätze im Parlament verloren? Ich möchte von euch beide hören, was eure Meinung ist dabei.
I have a question regarding the last elections. What went wrong? Why did the Arabic parties not manage to show a united front? Why were so many seats lost?
Ich möchte so gerne Deutsch sprechen, aber leider habe ich es ganz verlernt, also wird ich es im Englisch antworten. First of all, it's very hard to expect the Israeli Arab community in Israel to be unified. You know, there are leftist Palestinians and right-winger Palestinians, socialists and capitalists, religious and secular. By definition, I don't know why they should forget all this and just get united only because of their identity. It is true that one of the main obstacles for the Palestinian is lack of unity. And here I speak in broader terms, in broader of the Palestinian people. I always remember the South African example in which Nelson Mandela and the ANC succeeded to unite all the Black community into one struggle. I wish this was the case. It was the case in the times where Yasser Arafat was still in power and still alive. With all the criticism about him, he succeeded to unite the Palestinian people. And ever since then, it's falling apart. Israel has a role in this division, first of all, by the physical division between the West Bank and Gaza, between Jerusalem and the West Bank, between the diaspora and the West Bank and Gaza. But I wouldn't put it only on Israel. But when we come to the specific question, which was only about the Israeli Palestinians, those who can vote for the parliament, people were disappointed. Their party, the Joint List, which was the biggest party, first of all, split it into 2 and 3 parties. So the politicians split it. And once the politicians split it, rightly or not rightly, it was very hard to get united. Then they lost many votes on one party, Balad, which didn't make it to the parliament at all, and tens of thousands of votes were wasted, including, unfortunately, my vote, who I voted for them, and they didn't make it. And there is a problem in which the Palestinian members of parliament, who most of them are excellent legislators and excellent people, but they face such a system of delegitimization in the Israeli media and in the political life. They are excluded by the right and they are excluded by the left. And many Palestinians say themselves, maybe rightly so, why to bother and to participate in this game when in any case, even if we'll have a very big party, a very big representation, we will be excluded because nobody counts us. You know, the opposition had a meeting a few weeks ago, all the left center opposition. They didn't invite the Joint List at all to this meeting. So, you know, the average Israeli Palestinian, the average voter says, for God's sake, why should I take part of this masquerade? I will stay home and not go to vote. And then the party becomes weaker.
Aber die arabische Beteiligung war ziemlich hoch, so viel ich verstanden habe. Also die höchste in die ganze, weiß nicht, 70 Jahren.
Arabic voter participation was very high. If I understood this correctly, it was the highest ever, I think 70% or so.
No, not true. It was not the highest. It was not as low as people expected, but it was like the last elections, more or less. The problem is that the Joint List fall into 3 parts, and one part didn't make it, and a lot of votes were wasted, and the outcome was that out of the 3 different parties, only 2 made it. And the 2 had much less than the one united party because, unfortunately, the Joint List fall apart. That's very regrettable, but I don't think that we would have faced a total different reality if the Joint List would have remained together and even gained more power. Because, as I said before, they are excluded in the political Israeli game. We claim we have 120 members of parliament, but in fact, we have only 100, 105. Only the Jews are part of the game, and that's the truth.
If you allow me, we are talking here in Switzerland about our opinion, what we can do as a civil society and so on. But what I would be interested is what is your advice, what is your expectation towards the Swiss public, what we can do really to support effectively the Palestinian struggle? And secondly, what is your expectation towards the Swiss government? What should be done from their side, and where can they take their own responsibility?
I can speak in terms of what I mentioned previously, that there are different levels of support at the state level. I think it's key that the concept of recognizing the state of Palestine today be made immediately. There's no reason today that Palestine should not be recognized unless the state believes that there should be a single state here from the river to the sea. And that's where we're heading anyway. So if anybody wants to maintain that they support a two-state solution, many would say we're beyond that. But if your state is saying that, then putting political weight behind supporting the state of Palestine by recognizing it today and joining the majority of the world who already did is an important step. At the state level and actually at the local level as well, it's important to hold Israel accountable. I wouldn't expect, even though I would hope to see sanctions being applied against Israel, but at least not to entertain doing business with Israel, not buying military goods from Israel, not allowing produce into the Switzerland supermarkets. I mean, Israel needs to understand that there is a price to be paid economically, because today this is the most valuable and profitable occupation that they can ever dream of. And it's the international community that has to crack down and say, we will not do business as long as you continue to violate Palestinian rights. At the level of your organization, Jerry had sent us a few different projects that you're working on. I think they're all very feasible projects. I don't like to romanticize the Palestinian reality. We're human beings. We're in a prolonged conflict, and we need to wake up in the morning and put food on the table. So when you speak of potentially engaging our ICT sector for remote employment with Swiss companies, absolutely. That is something that will get people to stay in Palestine, as well as being employed with foreign markets, which are less volatile than our local market. Keep in mind, we have a very developed ICT sector. So developed that as the Israelis historically have provided work permits for Palestinians to enter from the West Bank and Gaza into Israel for the construction industry, for the Israeli agricultural industry, for the Israeli service industry like hotels, now they're actually providing a work permit for our software engineers so they can be employed directly to Israeli companies. So that means we have a level of quality of human resources in ICT that could easily be redirected if they found the markets, and Switzerland could be one of those markets. One of the other things that was on the list that I saw is a Swiss-Palestine Joint Business Council. Very positive move to create an institutional connection between the two private sectors to understand, number one, that we could do business together, keeping in mind that there's a political context to what we're doing. If you're telling the Swiss business people that this is like Switzerland and you can come and everything is straightforward, it's not. People who enter our market need to come with the consciousness that they're coming to support a distressed economy under occupation. I'm an American citizen, so I have done such partnership with American business communities in an organization called Americans for a Vibrant Palestinian Economy. That could be a model that you can look at. In terms of the other item listed, the Palestinian Arts Film Festival in Zurich, excellent idea. Our arts and cultural sector is a thriving sector. The amount of documentaries and short films coming out of Palestine, given our population, is amazing. And it's a way that we can also articulate to a broader audience of what is happening here. So I do think that there's a lot that can be done. Engaging the Palestinian economy can start by, in a constructive way, by buying Palestinian products. During the holiday season, buy Palestinian products. There are many online platforms to do so. But ultimately, there's a two-edged sword here. One is positively construct opportunities to engage the Palestinian economy, but you would be blind if you don't also work to hold Israel accountable, because we know that they are structurally limiting our ability to do business here. They're focusing our efforts to do business for the sake of the Israeli economy. So we want to take that labor force and do development work and business work that can serve the global market as well. And we need markets and partners to do that with. And Switzerland is better than anywhere else to be able to do that.
I would like to add a few things. First of all, I think in terms of civil society and public opinion, you have a great role in stopping the Israeli propaganda, which labels any criticism on Israel as anti-Semitism. You shouldn't fall into this trap, and you should be courageous enough, if I may say so, to tell Israel, the Jewish lobby, the Israeli embassy, that not only you may criticize Israel and not be an anti-Semite, in many ways, if you care about Israel, you should criticize Israel. And maybe the real anti-Semites are those who refrain from criticizing Israel today and are supporting Israel blindly and automatically and ignoring the black or the dark side of Israel. So this is one mission that I can see to stop this unbelievable success of Israeli propaganda system, which really paralyzed Europe, in many ways also the United States. Anyone who dares to say something immediately is labeled as an anti-Semite. It's unbelievable. And you know it better than I do. And it's more a question of freedom of speech in your country than a question of Palestinians or Israelis. And the second thing I would say, take the example of Russia invading Ukraine and take the same measures you took against Russia to another invasion, to another occupation, which is a little longer, not 1 year old, but 55 times longer. And maybe 50 times longer is enough of a period to take the same measures that you took against this huge machinery called Russia. If you were so courageous toward Russia, you can afford yourself to be courageous toward another illegal occupation which no country in the world is recognizing.